It's 8:45 p.m. on Wednesday, the 1st of February 2017, and this is the Ask TCW podcast live. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Ask TCW podcast. My name is Jono Bullard. I'm delighted to say that joining me to discuss the questions that you've sent in to us are Tina Taylor.
Hiya!
Andy Haywood.
Good evening.
And Paul Balm.
Hello.
So we're going to kick straight off, and this first question comes from Chris Lovell. He is a Belfast Giants fan, and he sent this in to us a couple of weeks ago after the last Ask TCW podcast that we did. But he says, do you think at times the fans are overlooked? For example, an ex-player, Brock Wilson, is very much echoing what fans have said for years, and the owners basically ignoring them. Do you think it shows a level of arrogance in general, especially if you consider that the fans really disagreed and stopped attending, then all of the teams would cease to exist? Andy, you kick us off.
I suppose they probably do, but I don't know whether it's as sinister as perhaps it can appear at times. The thing with what Brock's said and what his vision is and what even he's offered in a lot of aspects, a lot of people would like it, but a lot of people also understand that it's probably not quite as simple as just sort of doing it, and I think it'd take time, and I'd be very surprised if, as a league, they've not listened to what Brock said and at least thought about some of the ideas that he's come up with, not necessarily with an idea of perhaps ringing him up and saying we've got a job for you. Maybe they might not do that, but I'd certainly like to think that as a league we would have discussed what's been said and what ideas could work going forward. I think they probably do overlook us at times. But I perhaps don't think it's as sinister as, everybody wants this doing, but we're not going to do it because we don't want to. So, knickers to them.
Paul, your thoughts?
I think pretty much like Andy said. And I think the thing is that what happens when a player or somebody says, I think that it sort of crystallises an opinion is sort of in people's minds. It's sort of like charities getting celebrities to endorse them because it's like, oh, it's that person. I'll listen to that. Where so many fans with so many sort of differing opinions that I think it can almost be quite difficult to. I mean, yeah, there are sort of trends of opinion and things, but it can be very difficult to do, and they're not going to follow. Or pay attention to every opinion because, well, some opinions are just rubbish, including ours.
Tina?
Just in case anybody says.
Yeah, just to get that out there before anybody else does, Paul. I think with the amount of stuff that is going on in the league, I mean, you've got this, you've got the situation where the league owners. So the league board is made up of team owners and GMs and such. So you've got your own business to think of as well as the wider structure of it. So while you're busy getting your head into all of that, I suppose you can also it can be possible to forget about the little people, as it were. So it can tend to feel like that, but I think you get that more acutely in the various fan bases. There's been an awful lot of noise just lately with us, with our own fan base. You sort of get it less so with other teams, I think, at times. I mean, I don't know if it's got anything to do with the size of the fan base, or if it is the personnel running the show or what. But yeah, there does seem to have been more unrest amongst the fan base, in fact all the fan bases this season, through one thing and another, and I don't know if it's just exacerbated social media, or if it's actually something that is coming to the fore right now. So but yeah, I think he's got a point, but like Andy says, I don't think it's not always a case of, oh, we can't be bothered to do that. So it's just a case of it's not physically possible. There's an awful lot to do. Just to sort of pick up on the Brock Wilson's various articles and interviews that he's done, and I also listened to Todd Kelman's interview that he did with Rob McGregor, and a lot of what Todd was saying was, we agree. I agree with a lot of things that Brock is saying, but it just can't be done at the moment. So, yeah, I think, hopefully things will start to feel a little better as the league progresses. But the league does have to remember, what is at the very core of it, which is the fans.
And I think if anyone hasn't listened to that Todd Kelman interview, it is on the Elite League website that he does with Rob McGregor, and he does answer a lot of the questions and queries that Brock did put in the interview that we did with him a couple of weeks ago. Certainly well worth a listen, and it's very hard to disagree with what a lot of what Todd says in that interview, so I strongly recommend it. If you want to get in touch with us tonight, you can do so via Twitter. It's @CatsWhiskersTV. Use the hashtag AskTCW. That's if you would like to get in touch with regards to anything that we talk about, or if you would like to send any more questions into us, and if we have time, we will squeeze them in at the end of the show. So to move on, and obviously it was announced that Neil Black will be doing a question and answer session with fans at the Salt Box from 6 till 7 p.m. on the 21st of February, prior to Panthers game against the Cardiff Devils. And we've had a few questions sent in about this, and I'm going to start with this one from Max Artist. He says, I hope Neil Black will truly listen to what the fans have to say, and this is not just a cheap brainstorming session for him to take ideas, sit on them a while, tweak slightly, then catch in on his great idea. Paul, what do you reckon to that? I can't see it being like that, if I'm honest, but your thoughts.
I hope it's not, and it does sort of tie into what we were just talking about. In a way, but I mean, a lot of things have been said. They sort of actually come up in the next question, so I won't cover them that much really about what this is and the reasons behind it, the timing and everything. But whilst it's easy to be cynical, and at times, let's face it, Panthers management, almost help you to be cynical. Really, we've been crying out for this for years. I've lost count of the number of times I've said that things like this should be happening, although with a fan base the size of ours, that is difficult. But I think we've just got to hope that it doesn't. If Neil Black, I'm sort of confused by it really, because if Neil Black comes, listens to what people have got to say to him, and takes those ideas away, surely that's a good thing. I don't quite get the sort of reasoning behind it, if I'm honest.
Okay. Andy,
maybe I'm just getting confused in my old age. I don't know.
Andy, you got any thoughts?
Well, I must admit, I that very last point that Paul picked up on, I immediately picked up on, in the sense that surely that's exactly what this thing should be: is that he listens to the fans, and then he sees what he can implement, whether he has to tweak them slightly or not. But obviously, by listening to the fans, he's going to get a general feel for what people want. And whilst I agree that doesn't necessarily have to cash in on the idea as such, or even claim that it's his own. But obviously, if he hears something in this meeting, in this Q&A that he likes, or gets asked a question that gets him thinking, then I can only see that as being a good thing, and that he takes it away and works from it and improves any of the suggestions that are there. It improves on the experience for the fans and the team.
Tina, I'll put this one to you because it's another question we've had regarding this. It's like, is the Q&A an actual attempt to engage with the fan base or a cleverly timed PR stunt to appease a restless fan base?
Well, but before I answer that, I just want to say good luck to Max because he's got an operation coming up, and I know he's a bit worried about it. So we'll miss his questions while he's recuperating.
Yeah, good. Yeah, all the best, mate.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, in terms of the timing of it, it is interesting, and whether or not it's got anything to do with as I say, the general unrest that seems to be happening, the Brock Wilson interview, the formation of the supporters trust. There's all sorts of things that are happening right now, and I think the Panthers organisation would have to be completely cloth-eared to have not noticed something. So the fact that it's happening at all is a good thing. Is what I want to get straight off. It's there's been. I mean, we've had questions. We've had Ask TCW questions that have focused on Neil Black and what his position is on how the Panthers are doing, and why we're not challenging for the league again, and all sorts of things like that. So. Yeah, it's a good thing, but yeah, the timing is curious, but I don't know if it's been triggered by anything in particular or whether it is just a response to the whole culmination of unrest that seems to be going on at the moment.
I quite like the timing. You mean the timing of in sort of an hour and a half before a game?
No, I mean the timing as in the point in the season at which it's
right.
But yeah, that's a good point you actually make, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually. I mean, it's better for me because I can just go straight from work. But I think with things like this, if it's got to be, constructive and useful, you've got to have limits to it. It could end up as a 3-hour moan fest.
But the other thing is with it, and the other argument is with it being so short. Because an hour will go by very quickly, it then depends on the quality of questions that are asked.
It does with anything like that, though, doesn't it? But it's a start. That's another way you could look at it. It's a start. We've not had this in years. We've been saying this is what we want, and we've got what we want.
Yeah.
You see, I also think
start moaning again. It just seems daft to me.
I think with regards to the timing of it in the season, I think realistically it's the only time that it ever gets thought about. Whether that's right or wrong, if everything's going hunky-dory, if we're top of the league at this point of the season and we're winning games comfortably and we're miles ahead, no one has a gripe about the management like we have at the like the fan base has at the moment in general. I think ultimately it is. It's these periods where things aren't going so great that make people talk and make people get have these feelings, and I think ultimately it's the right time for a member of the management like Neil Black to do exactly what he's doing, and I think that like I say, rightly or wrongly, whether we should be having these sort of things every season, I don't know, but obviously you've got to imagine that the reason why it's being done is to appease fans, and that's surely a good thing.
Yeah. And the final question that we've had regarding this, this comes from Twitter at Panthers6233Sam. He says, "What would we ask him?" Tina.
Do you want me to give my answer as I gave it before we started recording?
Yeah, if you want.
Well, I'll it's basically webcasts.
So you're just going to go up to him and go webcast?
Yeah, well, I mean, just to give it, a sort of some sort of context. We've proved we can do it. So what's stopping us? What's stopping us at least giving it a go? It's we've done prior to the Continental Cup weekend, the final weekend. We did one webcast against Sheffield. It was a sold-out arena. And I don't know what prompted it, and I don't know why we didn't follow up on it. And if you log into the Panthers TV website, it's still there. You can buy it if you want to. So yeah, webcasts. Why not? At least for like the teams north of the border and over the sea. They are not going to come for example, a Sunday or a midweek game, webcast or no. If they're not coming, they're not coming. So you might as well make a bit of extra coin selling a webcast to them so that they can watch their team and they'll appreciate it a lot more. So, yeah, webcasts, ?
Paul?
I think Tina should just go up to him and just go, webcasts. I think that'd be a lot better.
I can be quite forceful when I feel like it.
Really? Okay. I think I'd ask why we haven't got a specific strength and conditioning coach. Well, given the number of injuries we've had, the last 3 seasons have been blighted with injuries. Surely you've got to look at it and think, how can we combat that?
Yeah, I think that would be the one that I would ask him as well with regards strength and conditioning. Andy, what would yours be?
Mine would be a bit more general, sort of just as not necessarily a sort of a question that's going to get anything ridiculous out of him. But I'd just like to know sort of the ins and outs and the day to day of how this team is ran, how it's run. Is it a case of he has a set budget at the start of the season and that's what he sticks to and gives the team? Does he give the team so much of a budget at the start of the year with the option of, depending on how the season's going, if it's tanking so badly they can get resources, or if it's going really well but they just need something to get them over the edge, a few more resources? Just a sort of a general feel as to how how the coaching staff are able to recruit for the team, and obviously his sort of not necessarily day-to-day involvement as the chairman, but of an owner, but sort of what is his role and how does the club run from the inside? Because it's something that is quite interesting. It would answer a lot of questions that I think fans would have, and ultimately I think it's something that he probably could answer.
Okay. Well, thanks.
You got any time left in the hour after you'd asked the question?
Yeah, true. Well, thank you very much for your questions on that. Just to pop back to the first question we had from Chris, he's been in touch with us via Twitter at CatsWhiskers TV. He says, do you think the unrest may be because the league and format has become a bit stale and expected? Just as a follow-up to his first question and the answers we gave. So
yeah, sorry, can I jump in on that, actually?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because the league and format has become a bit stale and expected, but that could be like indirectly, because we're not seeing much changing, and as it's been for the last few years, we've had the conference system in place, and in terms of how the league actually works, it seems to be running itself now. So surely there's time to work on other things. So perhaps it's sort of that kind of familiarity that we're seeing. We're effectively looking at a league that seems to be chugging along quite nicely, and there's no progress being made in other areas. So yeah, I can see where he's coming from with that.
Paul, Andy, anything to add?
Not
really.
Okay. Hope that has answered your question, Chris. So, moving on to a question about the EPL, or the EPIHL as it is now known, and it comes from Nick, or Nicky Master 2011 on Twitter, a Blaze fan, and they ask, 3 teams could be gone from the EPIHL. Is it a worrying future for them? And of course, Milton Keynes and are going to be in the Elite League next season. Guildford have applied to join, and sadly the Manchester Phoenix were wound up earlier this week and will not be taking any further part in the EPIHL season, and the club has sadly been liquidated and will not be seen again, sadly. So, Paul, I'll let you start off on this one. They're down to 7 teams. Is it a worrying future for them?
Well, it's going to be, isn't it? I don't know a lot about that league, I'll admit, but if you can talk in general terms, any league that loses 3 teams, you've then got to wonder about the viability of the rest of it. We've been in situations, ironically, with the Manchester Phoenix, with the ISL dropping down to 6 teams and playing each other. I forget how many times we played each other that season, but it was like Sheffield every other week. Mind you, that's this season as well, isn't it? But it's got to be you've got like that area sort of on the M4 corridor where you've got Guildford, Bracknell, Basingstoke. They're going to be if Guildford do move, they are accepted into the Elite League. That's a big chunk of money that Bracknell and Basingstoke are losing from those home crowds, and as well, it's a risk for Guildford because they won't have those games anymore either. People are going to have to be travelling further and things like that. But I mean, it's never good news when a team like Manchester, Phoenix, for all that they've been through. When a team folds like that, it's never good. And yeah, I think they are worrying times ahead for that league.
Okay, Andy.
I think definitely, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Well, I would say probably anything about the EPL. To be honest, I don't follow it at all in that aspect. But from what I read, with the news that obviously, the sort of the shock news that Guildford were applying, and obviously Milton Keynes coming up next year, Manchester's financial problems. I believe that Bracknell themselves have had financial problems this season. So although I don't know the ins and outs, and obviously they haven't liquidated like Manchester have, but you've got to worry for the league, because obviously if they've got 3 teams leaving and reducing them to 7, and it's already relatively unstable, it's not looking good, unfortunately. From a selfish point of view, and I'm pretty certain that it will never happen because of all the politics involved. It'd be great if they all came up and joined the Elite League and made it into a bigger league, and perhaps bigger and better conferences, and a better competition. But I think we're still quite a way away from that. So at the moment, it's just very much a case of it will be interesting and maybe worryingly interesting as to what happens to the teams in the EPL, because, like I say, if another team goes, like a Bracknell or Telford or someone like that, if they do disappear because they can't sustain operations, then I can't imagine there'd be too much interest in it from the rest of the team.
Okay, Tina?
Nothing further to add.
Okay. I mean, I do know that the chairman of Ice Hockey UK, Richard Grieveson, has had a meeting looking at getting a new 2nd and 3rd tier up and running with more of a focus on developing British players. I think, from my own personal point of view, is this is what it's going to have to come to, because I can't see the EPL continuing, certainly in its current format, with only 7 teams, without other teams joining, or even teams dropping down from the Elite League, which I also can't see happening. So it'll be a very, very interesting summer once again as we see how everything is thrashed out. I mean, Tina, I think I remember a tweet from you about these Richard Greaveson meetings, because the Elite League haven't been involved, and I think you was urging them to be involved.
Well, yeah, it was almost a throwaway comment, really, but I just found it interesting that, you know, the National League and the EPIHL seemed to be involved in the discussions, but you know, there didn't seem to be any mention of any Elite League involvement, and I think that's probably an opportunity missed, to be honest. It would be. Yeah, a missed opportunity, just cutting ourselves off from the rest of the hockey leagues. I think we need to communicate better, and that sort of meeting that Richard is you know, those sort of meetings that he's putting together, I think somebody needs to be there from our league. You know, we can't. I know we're called the Elite League, but we can't continue to, you know, behave in this elitist way. You know, it's just gonna damage any development of great British ice hockey. You know, you've got to think of the big picture, because if we get to a point again where we're just flooded with imports and there's no decent Brits to be had, then, you know, I think I've said this before, you know, the league will just disappear up its own backside again, and I don't think we can. Nobody wants that. No, you know, it's. We are talking today about, you know, a team that has gone under, and, you know, how the fans must feel, you know, and if we get to a point where we're not developing our homegrown players, then we may also end up with the same prospect, because we're trying to sustain teams full of imports, and it just can't be done. We just can't afford it. There isn't the money in British ice hockey to ignore the British development at the moment.
Okay. Moving on to British development, a question from our good friend Adam Reddish. He says, with the league gone, why aren't Panthers using the opportunity to look at young players within the Nottingham organisation to help their progress? Why won't the Panthers formalise links with the Lions to allow this? Andy?
Yeah, it's always a tough one. There was a time when we did used to sort of, not necessarily actively, but there was a time when it was sort of more noticeable that we had, again, not really an involvement, but obviously, you know, it was noticeable that people were down watching the Lions. It was noticeable that certain players were playing for the Lions and then being brought up into the Panthers team, and not necessarily on a sort of farm team sort of basis. It wasn't a case of, you know, we were using the Lions as some sort of development league for ourselves, but it was sort of utilised more, and obviously than what it seems to be at the moment. But it is difficult. I think one thing that for me personally that you sort of also have to think of is, you know, yes, I agree that the league has gone, but I imagine there would be, you know, quite a uproar if, you know, we actively came out and said, you know what, the league's done, we're going to get rid of quite a few players, or, you know, we're going to stop icing quite a few players, and we're going to play, you know, 5 new 18-year-old British kids in every game now for the rest of the season. It would be nice in a development side of things, but I don't think it'd be viable from a sort of fan perspective. I think there'd be quite a bit of uproar from the majority, whilst the minority would probably say, yeah, it's a good idea. But I do think that there should be stronger and closer links. But unfortunately, as with all things in this sport over here, it all seems to boil down to politics.
Mm. I mean, from my own point of view, and this is something I feel quite strongly about, is I don't see the reason why we couldn't have a couple of guys from the Lions who could play up at an opportunity, maybe at a weekend, certainly at a midweek, just to give them that experience, and but they still be getting their ice time with the Lions. However, there's also another way of looking at this as well, is that say you have a player come up, they don't make the grade and then they're sent back down. It's then left to those coaches within the Nottingham Junior organisation and the Lions, so the likes of Matt Bradbury and guys like him, to actually then deal with that player, because you're talking about probably 18, 19-year-old lads who probably had their dream quashed, and they've got to then deal with it. And I think that's always going to be difficult as well, and I think that's something that's not seen or mentioned, and I know it's something that I've spoken to Matt about in the past, so it's a difficult one. I mean, Paul, Tina, anything to add?
It is, but we've got to look for people who want to try and make that step up, and not everybody's going to work. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be the end for them. Either it might be they're just not ready at that time for our level. It might be that the next step up from the Lions, whatever that becomes, is where they need to go next. But going back to the original question, I think we could and probably should be looking at bringing some through if we can, if they're available, if the other commitments and there. So, not just for this season. We've talked time and time again about how short bodies we are. Even if they just get a few shifts to give people a rest, that helps us, but it also helps them and us in the long term as well.
Yeah, Tina, anything to add?
No, not especially. I mean, obviously we have no formalised ties. Well, I said not really. I probably have got. I've got something to add now. I'm probably going to lead myself into something. But yeah, I know what you're saying about you've got these sort of late teenage lads who are really looking forward to they want to make the big step up, and maybe they're not good enough, and they have to go to the Lions. Unfortunately, that's the nature of sport, and they have to be ready to deal with that. Unfortunately, they are young adults at that point. So in a certain respect, there's a bit of managing themselves that needs to happen if it doesn't work out for them. Obviously we're talking hypothetically because this sort of thing doesn't exist at the moment. But also, I mean, the junior system is a bit of an interesting one, because I was having a conversation with somebody who has and this has sounded a bit like my mate's brother's dog says, but I was having a conversation with somebody who has a friend whose son is in the junior system, and apparently Corey Nielsen offered to help with some of the coaching, and the massive amount of hoops that they were making him jump through to make that happen. He just said, you know what, it's not worth it. It just wasn't as simple as him turning up and saying, can I help? Which is what you would like to think. If the coach of the Nottingham Panthers, the professional top league, top tier team turns up to your kid's session and goes, can I do anything to help? You'd like to think that they'd be able to, come right on him. Give us some pearls of wisdom, but it doesn't appear to be as simple as that. So we obviously don't have that. We don't have that rapport, and I think that's. It seems to it's becoming a tagline for me tonight. It's an opportunity missed for me.
Okay. Moving on to the next question, and that comes from Matthew Dodd. He says, would you rather be in the CHL, with probably little chance of winning? I would say no chance of winning, to be honest, Matthew, or automatic entry back into the Continental Cup for a chance to defend the title and be back-to-back Continental Cup winners? Andy?
I think that's actually a really good question, because there is part of me that would like to be back in the Continental Cup to try and defend it. And obviously, if we could win it again, it would be another fantastic tick in the box. But I think the lure of the CHL on a personal level is too much for me. So I would say the CHL all the time. Basically, we don't get opportunities like this to play against some of the best players in Europe, definitely, if not the world. It's great to welcome them to sort of our backyard, as it were. So I would say the CHL.
Okay, Paul.
I think it is really good. When I saw this, I thought that's a really good question. Second best one we'll get asked tonight. I honestly don't know. I'm like I think I'd sort of pretty much agree with Andy. Yeah, going back and having a chance to defend would be nice. But the CHL as well may allow us to bring better players in. Is that? So that's really difficult. That really difficult.
Tina.
Yeah, I know what everybody's saying. I like the idea of being in the Continental Cup again and defending the title, but I don't think anything is kind of gained by sort of I can't think of a better word, but stagnating in the same competition. I think we need to continue challenging ourselves, and the CHL is obviously exactly that. That is the Nottingham Panthers challenging themselves, and it's about improving the image of our team, the image of our league, and making a good showing. And we need to know the standard that we're dealing with in those kind of competitions. So yeah, while it would be a nice thing to just prove to ourselves that we can do it again, and maybe do it back to back. I would prefer personally, going into the CHL and having another good go at it. Really properly taking it seriously this time round. Obviously last time round we signed CHL specific imports and then let them go later on in the year. So we need to tool up for the whole season, including the CHL. And what blooming good fun it was last time.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I like the idea of defending the Continental Cup, but the for me, the lure of the CHL is too great, and I want to see us pit ourselves against the calibre of teams that play in that competition, and also see if we have improved any since the last time we was in it. I mean, don't forget we won one game last time. Can we win 2 games this time? I think that has to be the target. And but yeah, it's CHL all the way for me. But thanks for your question, Matthew. Cracking question. Moving on.
Ways are going a bit far.
Sorry?
I think all the ways going a bit far.
Wow. Yeah, figure of speech. Next question comes from Sam Balm, who many may remember as the student on Cat's Whiskers TV. He says, how long do you think it will be before we see goalies of the NHL calibre of Williams and McGrattan in the Elite League? Andy, start with you.
Well, I think not too far down the line. Ultimately, I think we've had some players some netminders in the Elite League era that are borderline. They might not be quite up there as the caliber of someone like Williams or McGrattan in terms of NHL. But you've got to look at. What one netminder that sort of springs to mind recently, mainly because I was watching Premier Sports the other day and I didn't realise he was there. That Dan Backler is for London now.
Yes.
We've had netminders that have been here that have been of a certain quality. Certainly in Elite League standards, you'd say. K-Wall for us, Koenig when he was at Coventry and Newcastle, Lehmann. They are all goalkeepers of that kind of quality that are special, and they might not. I've not looked into this. They might not have played any NHL games, but they're certainly head and shoulders above anything else that we've had in this league. And they will always, to me, be sort of like the benchmark as to how good a netminder is, are they better than any of those three? And I'm pretty certain that Wheatman himself has played a fair amount in the AIHL. I know he was at Hartford, but I don't know how many games he played at Hartford, and if he went anywhere else sort of before or after. But I do think we have a kind of level with the goalies that we get. It would be nice to see ourselves, preferably, but someone, not necessarily break the bank to get someone, but really put a marker down and say, look who we've signed in net. See if you think you can beat us.
Just having a look, 89 games Mika Wheatman played in the AIHL.
Thank you.
But I'm looking. I've had a quick look at all the others as well while you was chatting, and none of them played in the NHL. So, Paul,
he had a good start.
He did. Paul,
I said I didn't know if they had or not. But
no. I say I've just double checked and they didn't. So yeah. I think there was Philip de Rouville who played for the Scottish Eagles in the ISL, and I think he played for Belfast in the Elite League. He had 3 games for Pittsburgh in the NHL, so I think he's probably one of the very few in the Elite League era.
There was Bronsard as well, because he came back.
Bronsard didn't. He didn't play NHL. He was the first season of Elite League. So I think in the Elite League era, there's been very few who's had NHL experience. In the ISL, it was very different. A lot of netminders with limited NHL experience, shall we say, the likes of Jordan Willis, Mike O'Neill, who played for Sheffield, Mike Torchier, who people may remember, Trevor Robbins, who was regarded as one of the best netminders ever to play in this country, actually never iced in the NHL, but was at San Jose as a backup, but never actually got on. Likes of Derek Wilkinson, who played for Belfast, Frank Caprice, who played for Ayr and Cardiff, Rob Dobson, and Jim Harivnak. He played 85 games, ex-Manchester Storm netminder, and of course Frank Pietrangelo, famous Manchester Storm netminder, who played 141 regular season games and 12 playoff games in the NHL for Pittsburgh and Hartford. So in the ISL era, we did have quite a few netminders who did have NHL experience, but I suppose now it's whether we will start seeing that calibre of netminder, and I think that's what Sam's saying. Will we see that calibre of netminder start coming through, as we've seen the calibre of player or the quality of player increase in the past few years? Paul?
I think it will be different. Can I just say, though, really good question. Third best on the show tonight. I think one of the differences is that there aren't as many netminders as there are players in other positions. So that sort of decreases the chances of them coming over here. But who knows? We've been in positions where we never thought that players like McGrattan or Williams or Jansen would be over here. So never say never, but you just can't say. One other player that you've missed off that list, Jono, unless I wasn't paying attention, Panthers' own Danny Lorenz.
I was having a quick look through, and it was just did he play NHL as well?
Yeah, he had 3 rather short spells at New York Islanders.
Ah, right. There you go. So, obviously, the calibre was there back in the ISL era, but I suppose it's whether we will see it again coming through.
It's money in it, but it may be that the players that that we get are with all with all due respect, like McGrattan, like Jansen, getting closer to the end of their careers, maybe, and maybe they'll, fancy a change of change of direction, change of scenery, but who knows?
Tina, anything to add?
No, just to reiterate Paul's point of there's less goalies going around than there are outskaters, and I think particularly in the NHL, from what I've seen, if you find a good goalie, you hang on to him. you don't let him go. I mean, we're having some woes with my NHL team in terms of a backup goalie. So our starting netminder for the Bruins is just perpetually knackered because we can't find a reliable backup at the moment. We're sort of struggling with that. So
they can have Dan Green.
Don't call us, we'll call you kind of effort on that, I think, unfortunately.
He's reliable.
So in terms of goalies, if you've got a good goalie, then you hang on to them at the moment. I think that's kind of where it's particularly the NHL's at. So I think we may see a few more regular outskaters trickling over here before we'll see any goalies myself.
Okay. All right, moving on to the next question. This one comes from Lee Constable. He says, with our injury problems this campaign, we have pretty much been 2 or 3 guys down every game this season. If we had managed to sustain a mostly fit roster throughout, like the top 3 teams have, do you think our squad would have been good enough to challenge for the league? So keep this one as brief as you can, but I will ask all of you, and Paul, I'll start with you.
No.
Okay.
You told him to keep it brief.
Well, quickly why?
I don't think that our forwards are good enough.
Okay. Andy?
I think we would have a better challenge for the league, but I don't think we'd win it. I think we'd be closer to the top 3 at the moment if we'd have stayed fit. I think we'd have picked up more points, but so I suppose yes, in sort of simple terms with regards to question, but I wouldn't. I'd still probably put us down as 4th favourites.
Okay, Tina.
Yeah, I can't disagree with much of that. I think that, like Andy says, if we'd have had guys that had stayed fitter, then we'd be closer. We'd be sort of up there, and maybe putting pressure on the top 3. But I think we've had a few guys who have taken too long to warm up. It's like Williams came in, he's hit the ground running, and I think we've had some guys that didn't do that in September. So I think that's possibly what would have kept us out, just sort of on the periphery, really. But it would have helped enormously if we hadn't had so many injuries.
Yeah, I think, like you say, we would have been closer. I don't think we would necessarily have been challenging. However, I do think that if we'd have Jason Williams from the start of the season and we'd have kept Sam Oakford for the depth in defence, I think maybe we would have been. But obviously that's all hypothetical. So thanks for your question, Lee. Next question comes from Henry Appleby. He says, do you think we should sign any more players as injury cover to see us through to the end of the season? I suppose that follows on quite nicely from Lee's question. So, Paul?
Well, it's a difficult one. We're supposed to have players coming back. Whether the ones that are out want to play for us, of course, is a different matter. It's difficult at this time of year. You'd hope you've got a team that gelled. I mean, look at last season. It worked with Quick and McDonald, who I would have hung on to, but maybe they didn't want to come back. But, sometimes you can upset the dynamic. So it's a difficult one. But, again, it's like talking about the Q&A. It's what we've been crying out for. For ages. So to suddenly turn around and go, oh, no, we don't want it now. Perhaps seems a bit daft.
Andy?
Well, yeah, I'd certainly like to see it. And one thing I would say is even even if it seems relatively quiet as to, there's no rumblings as to whether we're looking at players. Last season really came out the blue, if I remember correctly. McDonald and Quick were both deadline day acquisitions and quite late on, and it was all of a sudden it was like, oh, we've signed 2 guys. Cool. And so I certainly wouldn't rule it out. And I do think that, on the whole, we're always looking to improve our squad. It might not seem it at times, perhaps, for a lot of people, but I wouldn't, I wouldn't be surprised if we made a signing or 2. But by the same token, that doesn't necessarily mean I would be surprised if we didn't.
Tina?
Yeah, can't add anything to that. If we're not going to get the bodies back that are injured anytime soon, then it can't hurt. But I think we're okay. But this being the Nottingham Panthers, you can't ever discount the possibility of more injuries cropping up.
I mean, from my point of view, there's 2 trophies still to go for, the Challenge Cup and the playoffs. And I think, if players are available, bring them in. I'm pretty sure we have the resources and the budget available. Let's just get them in and go for those two other trophies, because it's silverware at the end of the day. Okay. Final question coming up, and it comes from Angus Wilson. He says, why does there seem to be less fighting this season? Are the officials stopping it? Andy?
It's an interesting one, to be honest, because I can't really pinpoint a reason why. I think ultimately it's probably the way the game's going in a lot of respects. But I don't know. I just think that there's been less emphasis on teams to sign out and out fighters anymore than there had been in the past. But I still think that there are enough in the league that not necessarily warrants a fight every game, don't get me wrong, but I certainly am surprised that there's not been quite as many when you look at some of the names in the league, like your McGrattens, your Nielsen's, Klotz, Bordelot. But they're all players that I would have expected to have had quite a few. Having said that, I can't remember the exact statistics, but someone asked a question on the Panthers Facebook group about McGrattan and Jansen and sort of comparing the two's stats and things like that, and they asked about McGrattan doesn't seem to be fighting, whereas Jansen seemed to be fighting almost every other game seemed last year. And I looked it up, and McGrattan currently is on course to have more fights in the season than Jansen had in the whole of last year, and it's quite odd how it sort of seems to be a perception, almost, that because, and I can only put it down to the fact that Jansen was an aggressive hitter, so it almost seemed like he was busy and constantly being aggressive, whereas McGrattan's point production has been superb. It's been better than certainly I expected. And I think he's probably more valuable on the ice than he is off it. But I just think that the officials are probably hot on it more so than they ever have been. And I think for a lot of teams, I think there's a lot of emphasis on winning games. It's sort of almost become too important to win the games that they can justify. Just sending someone out to try and send a message. You look at Sheffield, for instance. When we've played them, there's been a couple of times where McGrattan has hit Fitzgerald, but there's been no reaction or anything from Fitzgerald, and that's not a slight on his character. It's ultimately, if McGrattan wants to get the fight, he's got to make the move and potentially put his team short-handed. But there are also times like Sunday where I'm surprised it took so long for Klotz to get a shift, considering the scoreline. Personally, if I was Danny Stewart, he'd have been sent out a lot earlier in the game.
I mean, Paul, I'll come to you with this with regards to McGrattan. Do you think it's because other enforcers are more, for want of a better word, too scared to go with him?
He carries an aura about him. I think, when you watch him, there's a sort of an aura that I think, maybe that is it. Maybe they are too scared. I don't know. I mean, one or two tangled with him, earlier in the season, and maybe they didn't want to do it again. But I mean, it was interesting Sunday night when Nicky Forup talked about the only player on the ice who's about his size. There was a bit of handbags between them, and McGrattan was almost like the last one to arrive. But he grabbed hold of the Blaze player and pulled him out of the way, and he stayed pulled out of the way. But to go back to the original question, I think it's down to one thing and one thing alone: that not everybody is tall enough to reach the fans in 5.
Oh dear. Tina, anything to add?
No, well, sort of. I mean, it's. I think it's becoming the culture now, really, isn't it? That there's less fights going on in all leagues in general, unless you count the LNAH, which if you're a fan of fighting, there's your league. But yeah, I think it's a culture thing, and you get the so-called enforcers coming over here, and you find out they can actually play, and so they're sort of carving out a different role for themselves, and I think they're enjoying that. So whilst they can still be the type of player that they've been expected to be, they can also add another dimension to themselves, and I think they're kind of enjoying that, really.
Okay. There is actually one final question. I apologise to Ian Pigeon because I missed it out. So I will go back to it. So this is the final question. And it regards playoff weekend ticket allocation. He says it's now getting out of hand. What about next year when 2 new teams come in? I'd like to see a limitation, ideally. For one team to have at least 4 blocks is unfair. Yes, Panthers have a big fan base. Some will miss out. So to summarise, what can be done to police it better? Paul?
I'm not entirely sure anything does. I mean, yes, Panthers have got more seats than everybody else because we've got more fans than everybody else. It's in Nottingham. More of our fans are going to go. It's simple market forces for me. But we can't extend the NIC. That's not going to happen either. So what can you mean? Obviously, yeah, there is the problem of fans from different, there's been a lot of talk apparently of Panthers fans who haven't been able to get tickets in our blocks. I mean, I think they've even, 18, I think, which was going to be an empty block.
Yeah, that's now sold out.
That's sold out. I know when I looked this afternoon, it was row U or something. So, they've been buying in other fans' blocks. But how do you stop that? How do you stop that in an era where you can buy tickets online? The only way to do that is to go back to selling them through the clubs, and I don't think anybody's going to want to do that because there will be clubs who won't fill their blocks. I mean, look at all the arguments we had before about where teams, the teams that brought fewer fans shared blocks. They all moaned about that. So you got blocks that there's the capability to spill over into, because with all due respect, Edinburgh aren't going to bring a full block. So it's yes, I get what he's saying, but I don't see how you can do it.
Okay, Tina, Andy, anything to add?
Yeah, I've got a little bit to add. I mean, we've discussed in the past the viability of other arenas hosting playoff weekend, and I think we all sort of unanimously came to the decision that Belfast was the only real viable option really, based on location, infrastructure, and size of arena and what have you, because there's so few other places outside. There's I don't think there's any neutral venues that have got a ready-made ice pad that would have as many seats as we would need. So coming to that conclusion that Belfast is the other viable option, I would fully expect that Belfast would get the kind of allocation over at the SSE as we would get at the NIC. So I think, like Paul said, you've got to cater to what's around you. Find Panthers. It's kind of been demonstrated today. You've got Panthers season ticket holders who were given a preferential date, and that's sold really well. General sales happened today. Panthers have not only sold their allocated blocks, they have sold out an additional block. So it's not necessarily that it's you can call it unfair if you want, but I don't find it unfair if we're not filling them. That block 18, if they'd have had hundreds and hundreds of calls from Cardiff fans, that block 18 may have ended up being a Cardiff block, but they didn't. They've had hundreds and hundreds of calls from Panthers fans. So I think, as I say, if it was to be held at somebody else's arena, I would expect the home fans to be allocated more blocks, and I would expect them to sell those blocks. I think, in terms of this kind of thing, it's location, location, location.
Yeah, I agree entirely.
Andy?
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think in an ideal world, it would be nice to have an arena divided equally if it was possible, but it isn't possible on current fan bases. But certainly sort of divided by maybe percentage. So, you work on the average attendance throughout the league, and then you divide the arena size by, the average crowds. In an ideal world, but ultimately it's not going to happen until the day it goes to a neutral venue, like a proper no affiliation to any one venue. But you're always still going to get similar amount of fans going. So if it's held in London, you're going to get a lot more Cardiff fans going than you are Scottish fans.
Yeah,
because of the proximity. If it's held in, for argument's sake, Birmingham, like the NEC or something like that, you're going to get the same amount of Panthers fans going as you do to the arena, realistically, because it's not that far. If it's held in Sheffield, I still think you're going to have the same amount as Panthers fans going, because again, it's not that far. Unfortunately, as has been discussed, the only really viable option for me would be to have it in Belfast. But I think the fact that every team would have to travel considerably is what puts them off hosting it over there.
Okay. All right, well, I think that brings us to a close tonight. Thank you very much for sending in your questions. If you want to send them in for next week, you can do it via Twitter. Use the hashtag AskTCW or our thread on the Cage Forum, Facebook, or our email, tcwonlinetv@gmail.com. So thank you very much as well to the panel, which is Paul Balm.
Thank you. And just before we finish, John, can I just say, going back to the EPL future,
yeah,
I am worried. I've just discovered something that does really make me worry for the EPL's future. Jason Hewitt's been made the coach of Hull.
Oh dear.
Doomed. People of Hull, you have my sympathy.
Thank you very much, Tina.
And on that bombshell, TTFN.
And thank you very much to Andy Haywood.
No worries, anytime.
Thank you very much for listening. We will be back tomorrow with our weekend preview podcast. But until then, thank you very much and good night.